Forget what the documentaries told you. Stalingrad wasn't only bullets and bread. It was paper, voices, and signatures, aimed like weapons. Orders from above tried to keep propaganda centralized and controlled. The front didn't cooperate. Radios died. Lines broke. Officers improvised. Men with printing ink and a loudspeaker could cause a retreat as surely as a mortar burst. Some of it worked. Some of it rebounded fast. These are the 7 banned PsyOps devices German 6th Army used at Stalingrad, 1942 to 1943. Number 7. Unauthorized leaflet shells. Forbidden messages fired into enemy lines. Berlin wanted propaganda controlled. Leaflets were supposed to come from authorized channels, with approved wording, distribution plans, and clear attribution. In late 1942, inside 6th Army's sector around Stalingrad, that neat process didn't match the tempo. Artillery was already firing. Paper could ride the same logistics. Some batteries used leaflet shells and makeshift payloads to drop messages into Soviet-held factory districts and trench lines. The point wasn't elegance, it was reach. A few lines promising food, medical treatment, or a safe surrender route. Others were meant to scare claims about encirclement, invented unit collapses, or, your commissar has abandoned you. It was cheap, quick, and impossible to fully supervise once the shells were issued. Sometimes it bought minutes. Captured Soviet accounts describe leaflets sparking arguments and extra checks before patrols moved. But repetition also taught patterns. In documented cases, Soviets collected the paper, mapped where it fell, and inferred which German batteries were active. A psychological tool became a targeting hint, and overuse gave away routine. Number 6. Captured Soviet loudspeakers. Enemy equipment used for confusion. German doctrine wasn't allergic to deception, but it did demand control. Using enemy loudspeakers without clearance risked the obvious problem. You could mislead your own side, trigger panic, or create a friendly message the wrong company takes seriously. In Stalingrad's chaos, that risk started to feel theoretical. When German units overran positions, especially in the fighting around the northern industrial area in autumn 1942, captured Soviet speaker gear sometimes came with the ground. Power it up, pointed across a street. Broadcast Soviet-style commands or familiar cadences to slow movement, draw heads up, or lure a patrol into a kill zone. The trick wasn't perfect Russian. It was timing, noise at the right moment. It did work in small, ugly ways. A few after-action notes describe Soviet groups hesitating under shouted orders, buying Germans seconds to shift a machine gun or pull back a squad. But it could also boomerang. Under bombardment and poor visibility, misheard phrases and stray echoes sometimes convinced nearby German elements that a Soviet breakthrough was happening. Confusion doesn't respect uniforms. Number 5. Improvised trench megaphones. Loud ideas, secretly banned. Officially, shouting matches across a rubble line weren't a plan. Unauthorized megaphone use was discouraged because it exposed positions, attracted artillery, and could be turned back on you. Commanders also feared freelancing one badly chosen phrase could undo days of disciplined messaging. In the street fighting of late 1942, men improvised anyway. A cone of sheet metal, a cut-down fuel can, even rolled map cases, anything that pushed a voice through wind, smoke, and broken walls. They used them to offer surrender terms, to bait Soviet soldiers into revealing themselves, and sometimes to imitate Soviet NCO commands in the dark. In a city where 2 floors could be 2 front lines, a loud, confident voice could make a doorway feel owned. The results were mixed. In some local actions, a shouted promise of medical care and warm food pulled individual soldiers out of cellars, especially when units were isolated. But the same device could also act like a beacon. Soviet artillery observers learned to prioritize the talking position, and Soviet commanders sometimes treated sudden German megaphone activity as a tell an attack, or a withdrawal, was coming. If you were a platoon leader in that maze, do you risk your men's concealment to try to end a fight with words? Number 4. Fake order passes and surrender slips. Ordered deception bordering treason. Paperwork mattered in the Red Army, and Germans knew it. But German regulations also treated forged documents as dangerous territory. Fake passes could be mistaken for real ones. They could be captured and traced back. And if higher headquarters saw uncontrolled forgery, the fear was simple: you're creating a parallel authority. As the siege ground on and the encirclement tightened into winter 1942-43, German personnel with access to stamps and typewriters produced passes and surrender slips meant to look official enough to disrupt routine. The goal was friction. Force extra checks at Soviet checkpoints. Create doubt about who had orders to move, who was allowed through, who was defecting. In close terrain, even a 5-minute delay at a doorway could reshape a skirmish. There were small successes. Soviet patrol reports from urban sectors described tightening document control after suspicious papers appeared, meaning the forgeries did create work, and sometimes slowed movement. But detection cut both ways. Once identified, Soviet counterintelligence and unit commanders increased scrutiny, and genuine defectors or civilians carrying real papers got treated harder. A trick that works today can poison tomorrow's surrender pathway. Before we move on, if you're holding a block of ruins with no radio and no reserves, which tool do you trust more? A leaflet shell, a loudspeaker, a megaphone, or a forged pass? Tell us below, and subscribe. The next 3 get even riskier. Number 3. Clandestine rumor leaflets. Truth-adjacent lies that spread faster than bullets. Central guidance preferred clean themes. Surrender instructions, humane treatment assurances, broad political messaging. Rumor tactics. Half-true claims designed to ricochet through a unit were treated as undisciplined and risky, because once a rumor is loose, you don't get to steer it. And Stalingrad was full of ears. So some German propagandists went small and local. Short strips of paper, handwritten notes, phrases that sounded like something a frightened soldier would repeat, not something a staff officer would approve. The Volga crossings are under fire. Your regiment is being pulled out without you. Commissars shot 3 men for talking about surrender. They aimed for the seams. Distrust of political officers, fear of being abandoned, resentment over rations. The method was simple: slip it into dead ground, tuck it in a torn coat, let prisoners, accidentally, keep one. It could sting. Soviet accounts mention sudden bursts of rumor chasing and internal questioning after suspicious notes appeared. But it also taught the Red Army to harden. Units increased political briefings and document checks, and suspicion sometimes landed on the wrong people: civilians, stragglers, even genuine deserters closing off exits Germans wanted open. Number 2. Unapproved black propaganda stationery. Official-looking paper that wasn't official at all. German PsyOps doctrine valued consistency, identifiable origin, controlled distribution, and wording that couldn't be mistaken for an actual order. Black propaganda materials disguised as enemy or neutral communications was sensitive even when approved. In an encircled army, unapproved versions were a command and control nightmare. Yet the temptation was obvious. Type a Soviet-style notice. Mimic headings. Copy the blunt tone of routine instructions. Use captured forms, borrowed stamps, anything that made the paper feel like it belonged on a Soviet clipboard. Some pieces weren't even meant to fool an officer, just to force a moment of hesitation in a sentry, or to get a man to step into the open to report. In the factory districts, where visibility was measured in doorways, that moment mattered. Sometimes it worked. After-action comments described Soviet posts delaying movement to verify papers, giving Germans time to reposition or disengage. But failure was punishing. Once a forgery pattern was spotted, Soviet units tightened entry procedures, and German scouts carrying real captured documents were treated as infiltrators. The paper didn't just stop working. It taught the enemy what to fear. Number 1. Unauthorized psychological warfare teams. When messaging becomes a private war inside the war. On paper, propaganda belonged to specialists. Messaging was supposed to flow through designated organs, with coordination between intelligence, operations, and higher headquarters. Freelance teams risked contradicting surrender policy, compromising sources, and creating promises: food, safety, evacuation that a starving pocket could not keep. Inside 6th Army's shrinking perimeter, ad hoc groups formed anyway. A translator, an NCO with a loud voice, a clerk who could type, a runner who knew the trenches. They carried scraps of pre-war phrasebooks, captured Soviet mail, and whatever paper could be found. They wrote custom surrender appeals aimed at specific units identified from shoulder boards or prisoners. They tried direct contact at night, calling names, describing a unit's location, offering a corridor that existed only for a few hours. It wasn't ideology. It was triage. There were local wins. Individual soldiers crossed over when a message sounded personal and immediate. But the blowback could be brutal. Promises made by a small team could not be honored at scale, and when Soviet soldiers felt tricked, later surrender attempts hardened into gunfire. Here's the hard question. Would you keep improvising, knowing your success might poison tomorrow's trust? Across Stalingrad, regulations tried to make psychological war tidy authorized slogans, controlled channels, predictable effects. The city refused. Men reached for whatever could move another human being. Paper, a voice, a stamp, a rumor. Sometimes it reduced killing. Sometimes it just rearranged it, or made the next attempt harder. If you want World War II history without simplification or mythology, subscribe. Brass and Blitz is here for the awkward details where doctrine meets desperation, and the record stays messy.